What's your most important asset? What is your most important asset? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And obviously you probably know the answer. It's your brain. And the problem is with your brain, sometimes your brain gets obsolete. For example, I was just on a radio show into California, and I was talking to the expert on money, and I was just reading him the stats on, when I graduated from school, 1970, you could actually save your way to retirement. If you saved $1 million in 1970 and you earned 15% interest, that meant you made $150,000 a year pre-tax with money. So, back in 1970, you could live on $150K a year. Today, if you save that $1 million, especially if in Europe or Japan, you'll be charged 5 basis points. Negative 5 basis points, which means they're going to charge you $500 to keep $1 million. In other words, you can't live on $1 million today unless you start eating into principal. And when I said this to this radio announcer, a very prominent guy in California, he went, "What?" He says, "Aren't you getting 5% interest?" I said, "Not that I know of. I don't know anybody's paying 5% interest." And it was kind of news to him that savers were losers. And it went downhill from there. Now, I was very nice the whole time, did my best. I just, give me the facts, give me the facts, give me the facts. He couldn't handle the facts. So he says, "Well, what do you recommend?" He comes back on, "What do you recommend if you don't save money?" I said, "Well, let me ask you this. Why would you save money in the first place if they're printing money?" Yeah, but what do you recommend? I said, "I'm not recommending. I'll just tell you what I do." He said, "I use debt as money." Then I quoted Donald Trump. He said, "Donald Trump," I just had the Wall Street Journal in front of me, and there's Trump saying, "I am the king of debt. I all love debt. But debt is tricky and it's dangerous." He goes, "So you use debt as money?" I go, "Yes." "Okay, bye." He went. I said, "What?" And then I heard him talking to his producer after he kind of hung up. He says, "I didn't know what to say. I've never heard that before." And this is the guy, okay? If your brain is your greatest asset, this guy is dumping dog doo-doo in your brain. So, ladies and gentlemen, this show is about changing your brain around. What's inside your brain? Because if you think saving money and investing for the long term in the stock market, when the stock market is at an all-time high, higher than the crash of 2008, and you think the stock market is going to keep going up, you have doo-doo in the brain, okay? Dog doo-doo, the worst kind. So today we're going to talk about how you can change those thoughts in your brains. Because the worst advice today is go to school. You don't learn anything about money. Get a job. Then you get fired anyway because they're downsizing or they're exporting the jobs. Work hard. And you work hard, you'll pay more taxes. Save money. And the government, just this whole system called the fractional reserve system. You put $1 in savings, the bank prints 10. You're not going to get ahead that way. And then get out of debt when debt is money, and then invest for the long term in the stock market. Today, it's about emptying out your brain, and you're going to have some good, better advice to replace it with. So we have 2 guests today. Tom Wheelwright, Rich Dad Advisor on Taxers. He's an entrepreneur, founder and CEO of ProVision, a premier strategic CPA firm, author of the Rich Dad Advisor book, Tax-Free Wealth. And Garrett Sutton, attorney and Rich Dad Advisor, author of Start Your Own Corporation and the ABCs of Getting Out of Debt. So we have 2 guests today, and of course my sweetheart, Kim. Any comments, Kim?
Well, yes. So what's your most important asset is your brain. And here's the thing. You choose what information and what advice you put in your brain. So we're going to be talking about taxes, money, legal, and what is good advice versus bad advice. How do you find good advice, and how come so many people are operating on bad advice? And we're going to have a very eye-opening show. So
I remember in Rich Dad Poor Dad, it came out in 1997, it was 20 years ago, I said, the rich don't work for money. What the rich work for are assets. They want to create assets, okay? And then the rich don't save money because they're printing money. It's really obvious. And then, of course, your house is not an asset, which really upset a lot of people. And then in 2007, the subprime real estate market crashed, and the people that got richest were the banks that really ripped everybody off. That's the system of business today.
And what you're talking about is people actually have to think for themselves, because following the old dogma, get out of, save for the long term, invest in mutual funds.
Get out of debt.
Get out of debt. Is not necessarily the best. It's not the best advice today, but you really got to think and you got to find and seek out that good advice and what works for you.
And one last thing, Rich Dad does not sell financial advice. We're not financial planners. We don't recommend anything. We sell financial education, and we, as Kim says, encourage you to think for yourself, because what I do, you probably should not do. Not too many people are going to borrow money to get rich, and you probably shouldn't unless you invest first in some education and some experience. So with that, there's a lot of people selling bad advice too, because Tom and Garrett are on the circuits and they're talking to people all over the world, and people come up to them and say, well, I went to this seminar and they told me this. And after you get through laughing and vomiting, then you try and clean their, get your paper towels out and polish off their brains, because they're full of bad advice today. And they pay for that advice. Is that correct, Tom?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, the amount of bad advice. Well, here's part of the problem. The problem is that what you were talking about at the beginning is that we have two types of bad advice. We have old advice that no longer applies anymore. It was good advice at one time. Right. It's no longer good advice. And then we have advice that's just always been bad.
So let me just interrupt for a second. So give me an example of bad tax advice.
Well, let me give you one example that's real quick. Garrett, Tom, and I were in Santiago, Chile. Fantastic seminar, fantastic city. I want to thank all the people of Santiago who were there. But Tom was talking about, because I was talking about how I could buy a Bentley and using taxes to do it, which drove this effing attorney crazy. and he is this most respected attorney. And he comes up and he says, you can't do that here in Chile.
Yeah, what I really loved is he came to Garrett, and Garrett said, you need to talk to Tom.
Of course. It was tax, not law.
So no, he did. And he goes, you can't do that here. There's laws. You can't do that here. And we have laws here. I'm going, we have laws everywhere.
Garrett, Tom, and Kim and I, we've traveled the world. The basic tax law and accounting laws are the same. But no matter where we go, some expert, like an accountant and attorney, will come up and they'll always say, you can't do that here.
So could they have done that there?
Well, it gets better, Kim, because what happened was, of course, the next morning, Robert gets up and he says, Tom, teach him how to deduct a Bentley.
So you could do that there.
But
there's always a way.
Yeah.
This attorney blew out. He did not want to hear it. He did not want to admit he didn't know something.
Interesting.
And that's the trouble with attorneys, right, Garrett?
Not always, Robert. But Tom and I, as you mentioned, do go to these various seminars, and the advice that we hear people give is absolutely horrible. And some is given by attorneys, others by CPAs. A lot of it, though, is given by people who pretend or kind of come off like they're an expert in the field when they have really no background at all.
Are they doing it because they want to sell you something?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Always. You always have to follow the money. And here's what I find. I find normally it's a financial advisor. I mean, you've had this experience. A financial advisor who says, okay, you shouldn't be in real estate. You should be in stocks because I get paid in stocks, but I don't get paid in real estate.
We've had that experience, yes.
It's called conflict of interest.
Yes.
Oh, my heavens. But it's rampant.
So, Garrett, legal advice. What's like the worst legal advice you're hearing today?
Well, from a tax and legal perspective, putting real estate into a C Corp is really bad advice.
Which Kim and I did do.
Originally.
Well,
yes.
and
we didn't know. We didn't know. That's how we started.
Once a year, I have a client come to me who says, with all due respect, Tom, my CPA said to put my real estate into a C Corp. And I say, that's really bad tax advice. There's double taxation. There's not as much asset protection with a C Corp as there is with an LLC. And if there's enough time, we can correct it.
There's no benefit to it. I mean, here's the challenge I always ask is, what's the better result? Okay, the question is, it's like we were talking about in Santiago. The question is not, is it deductible? The question is, how do I make it deductible? So the question is not, what, is this good or bad? The question is, what could be a lot better? And in this case, the C Corp, it's just there's nothing good about it. There's no benefit from doing it. So why not do it? And anybody who knows anything about real estate tax law would never do that. So what would you do better?
Now, how do you know if it's good advice or bad advice?
Well, here's one thing. It's like when you were on the radio the other day, Robert, and what question should they have followed up with instead of just hanging up is, okay, would you explain that? So I think that's a really good follow-up to say, okay, why? Why should I put it into a C Corp?
Instead of blindly.
Instead of just blindly accepting the advice, use your brain.
I think we're missing the big point here is this. You better choose your advisors carefully. And the thing that Kim and I know is we have Tom and Garrett here is at minimum, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you must have a knowledgeable accountant and a knowledgeable attorney. And the one problem I always run into is I have accountants playing attorneys and attorneys playing accountants.
Right.
Would you say that's true?
Oh, no question. I think the best, one of the best things working with Garrett is we talk every day. So we're always coordinating, and we know each other's strategies. We know what we do. I learn asset protection, he learns tax, and we make sure that we're coordinated. When your advisors aren't on the same page, I mean, that's the worst of all worlds, in my opinion.
Well, and what frequently happens is the CPA will say, well, that's a legal issue, go talk to your attorney. And the attorney says, that's a CPA issue, talk to your CPA. And then you never get the right answer. You need both people on the phone at the same time.
Once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. Today we're talking about your most important asset, and that's your brain. But you've got to be very, very careful what kind of dog doo-doo you put in your brain. Because there's two people. You know, Garrett and I go round and round on this. They go to school. I said, but you don't learn anything. So, and then I was just on another radio show. And this guy, New York Times guy, great guy. He says, Robert, you're amazing. I mean, you're successful, but you didn't go to a good school. I'm going, see, that's another frame of mind there, that you have to go to a good school to be successful. I want to remind them that, Steve Jobs didn't finish school, Gates didn't finish school, Zuckerberg dropped out, Dell, Branson, Disney, Ford, they all dropped out of school. But the framework is you have to go to school. And when I tell parents about not going to school, they say, don't tell my kids. Don't tell my kids. Don't tell my kids. And so that's what we're talking about here, is which we're doing our best today in this program to bust up your frame of mind. And be very careful. I'm not saying the other people are all bad advice, but you had better start understanding that not all advice fits you. Would you say that's true, Tom?
Oh, I see that all the time. Here's my favorite one. So, worst advice ever from an accountant: if you want to pay less tax, you just need to make less money. And I'm serious. I actually hear that from somebody once a month, that their advisor, their tax advisor, actually told them that.
And I hear the other side that says, "Oh, I don't mind paying so much in taxes because that means I'm making a lot of money. So I'm just going to make a lot of money. I don't mind paying all these taxes." I'm like, well, what if you made a lot of money and didn't have to pay so many taxes?
What a novel idea.
Yeah. But you said something novel, too, just a minute ago. You said you got to get your tax strategist and your accountant and your attorney talking together.
For sure.
And how often does that happen? I mean,
it's
with
rare.
us a lot.
With you guys,
with us it does, but I'll tell you, I run into people all the time. Their accountant would never talk to their attorney because their accountant goes, "Well, I know this. I don't need the attorney."
To,
Right.
Please listen to this program, because what you're going to be here is you can't get the dog doo-doo or the constipation, X-lax, out of the way. You can't hear our message, because your brain is your greatest asset. But many people have congested it with such silly sayings as save money, when back in 1970 I could get 15% interest, and today you get negative 5%. I mean, negative 0.05%. Why would you save money? At the same time, every time you put $1 in the bank, or a peso in the bank, or a yen in the bank, the fractional reserve system of the banking world, they print $10 more. So you never get ahead as a saver anyway. And now that interest rates are below zero in many countries, why would you save money? Yet most people say to their kids, as they're going to school, go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, and invest for the long term in the stock market and get out of debt. That is not the philosophy here at Rich Dad, and that's why it's opposite to what you've been taught. So today we have guest Tom Wheelwright, who's Rich Dad Advisor in Taxes, founder and CEO of ProVision, a strategic CPA firm, author of Tax-Free Wealth, Rich Dad Advisor book. His website is provisionwealth.com. And Garrett Sutton, attorney, Rich Dad Advisor, author of Start Your Own Corporation and the ABCs of Getting Out of Debt. His website is sutlaw, SUTLAW.com. And please listen, folks, because if you're still saving money and you're still hoping for job security, you still think getting out out of debt is the right idea, and you think that going to school will protect you from what's coming, I think your brain is constipated. It needs to be cleaned out. It needs some X-Lax in there right now. Any comments, Kate?
Oh, on that note, well, there's one thing that comes up a lot when I talk to women often. I hear too often, oh, my eyes glaze over when we talk about money, and they don't want to look at it. They put their head in the sand, and I see the same thing with tax advisors and legal advisors. It's like, oh, no, they know more than me, so I'm just going to follow their advice. I don't know anything about tax. I don't know anything about law, so I'm just going to blindly follow. And I don't understand why that.
And that's the problem. It's the blind following of advice. It's not that it's not even the advice itself. It's that you're blindly following the advice. Yeah. Why would you take somebody else's word for something instead of asking them to explain it to you? That's what drives me
even a doctor,
crazy.
You're gonna, if it's a serious thing, you're going to get a second opinion, right?
Well, and the doctor explained. I mean, what does the doctor do? The doctor starts out, spends 15 minutes asking you questions to diagnose what's going on. Where does it hurt? How does it feel? They're asking you all those questions. You go to an advisor. Frequently, you go to an attorney or an accountant, and you ask them a question. They say, well, here's what you do.
Yeah.
Well, how can they do that? They haven't diagnosed the problem yet.
Well, and a lot of times advisors intentionally do not provide clear advice. It's called hide the ball. Right? They want to hide the ball, make things as complicated as possible so that you will rely upon them for their advice.
Of course. So one big lesson we picked up right now is that if you really want to be rich, you need both an accountant and an attorney. Don't take, just one advice from one person. Because what does CPA stand for?
CPA stands for cannot protect assets.
And what does attorney stand for?
And the problem with attorneys is they can't do math.
Guilty as charged.
So the other part about it is this. As you know, there's financial advice for 3 levels of people: poor, middle class, and rich. So one lesson I want to pass on to you right now: you want to be poor and middle class, don't listen to this program, because all we're going to do is frustrate you. If you're middle class right now, you're probably saying, well, I'm going to go to school, and my kid will get to Harvard, and we'll go deeply in debt, and the kid will find a job with some big corporate firm and all this. But you learn nothing about money. So let me ask you this, Tom. If somebody goes to school and they're a high-paid employee, can you do any for them as far as taxes go?
I mean, outside of maxing out their 401k, I mean, there's really nothing to do for employees because the tax law isn't built that way.
Right. So when you go out there and you say to your child, get a job, you can't help them. Garrett, does any need to protect somebody with a job?
Not really, Robert. You're going to have regular insurance, but if you don't have assets, then you don't have much to protect.
Right.
So what you do is you protect the assets from the separating from the
Correct.
individual.
Right, and you know that when you look up tenant in the dictionary, the definition is plaintiff, right?
Yeah. So who needs a tax advisor, or who doesn't? Who does and who doesn't need a tax advisor?
Well, if you're just an employee, you're probably fine with TurboTax. I mean, seriously, you don't necessarily need a tax advisor. But
It's
if
a
you're
little too complex for me, though.
Well, it would be for you, yes.
But I mean, you might want a tax preparer, but a tax advisor maybe not. But if you're going to invest, or if you're going to have a business, you absolutely
even a part-time business,
even a part-time business, because the difference in tax. I mean, it's amazing the difference in taxes. Even the when you first start out, you're going to lose money, right? Probably most people lose money the first year they start a business. Well, if you do it right, that loss can actually be a gain to you, because it actually can reduce your taxes from your job, your full-time job. So you've really got opportunities there right off the bat. The minute you open that business, you've got an opportunity to reduce your taxes.
But Garrett, that also opens up a lawsuit, right?
Well, by having a corporation at the start, you're going to be better protected than operating as a sole proprietor.
But
as
the
a general
problem is
partnership.
you're stepping outside of the corporation that you work for.
As an employee of a corporation, you are protected.
But
when
the moment
claims,
you start your own
yes.
business.
The moment you start your own business, you are personally
for sure.
responsible for what happens in that business. So you need to take steps to protect yourself.
So as we talked about today, is your greatest asset is your brain. Some of you need to flush the brain. Really, really flush it, because you're operating on bad advice, old advice, or you listen to people like Susie Orman, and she has good advice. You know, she says if you're spending more than if you're a spending addict, you're a shopaholic, then you should cut up your credit cards, and that's what she says. That's very, very good advice. And if you're a Dave Ramsey fan, he says live below your means, keep your daytime job, and invest in a 401k. That's not bad advice either, is it?
for some people.
For some people,
Yes, that's very middle class,
Yeah.
vanilla advice.
Safe.
But for 95% of the people, that is the best advice. And Rich Dad is for that 5%. The 5% that really wants to be entrepreneurs, really wants to be wealthier, really does not want job security, but is really going for financial freedom. But you cannot achieve that if you got 1 foot on the dock and 1 foot in the boat.
No, I think that that's an important distinction because you have to decide where you want to be.
Right.
You know, if you want to be middle class, then
Dave Ramsey's great.
He's perfect. But if you want to get ahead, if you really want to be rich, if you want to have that great lifestyle when you retire, if you don't want to work until you're 67, 70, and then have to take a job at Walmart, then now this is the opportunity
it's the
to do
difference-
something different.
Yeah, it's the difference between wanting security versus wanting freedom.
Right.
So once again, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking to people about your most important asset, and that's your brain. But many people have had what I call obsolete advice put into the brain, or today they're soliciting bad advice. And some people are actually paying for that bad advice. I won't mention his name, but he's got a very popular book out. He's never been known for giving financial advice, but today he is. And he's recommending people turn their money over to his son who runs a fund. I think there's a little conflict of interest there. But is that a conflict of interest?
I would say so.
Yeah. What does conflict of interest mean?
That means when you have a duty to
Educate, but you're selling.
You have a duty to educate, but then you're benefiting from people coming to you.
Right.
So you're encouraging them to invest with you. That's a conflict of interest.
Right.
The worst time is when you've got a CPA who's saying, "Okay, go do this," but guess what? I'll take your money too. I'll invest your money for you. And to me, that's a horrible conflict because I think a CPA should be the one person you get to go to that is objective and says, "I'm just working for you."
So how do you find good advisors?
I actually think you have to first decide what is a good advisor. Okay, before
So
because you don't even know what you're looking for. Most people have no idea what they're looking for. They think they're looking for somebody who's smart. But I'm always first looking for somebody who cares about me first. Okay, so when I go an attorney, I want to know if I'm asking Garrett questions, I'm interviewing him because I want him to be, I'm thinking I want him to be my attorney. I want to interview him, but I want him to be asking me questions. I want to know that he cares more about me than lining his pockets with my money.
Let me give you an example. Tom already mentioned it. When Kim and I, we make most of our money through real estate. Rich Dad's is a hobby for us most of the time. Well, this CPA came from a very major firm. Tom knows the guy, out of Washington, D.C. He looked at our numbers, and Kim and I are financially free because we have tons of real estate. His first advice was to sell all our real estate and give him the money so he could invest it for us. He could be our fund manager.
He said, "You're too heavily vested in real estate. I think you should sell a lot of that and put it into the stock market and mutual funds."
And that's a clear conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest.
He is giving you advice at $500 an hour and encouraging you to
give him more money.
Give him more money that he can earn additional money on. Clear conflict of interest.
Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, and this guy had the tricky tortoise glasses on and the wingtip shoes, and he looked like a preppy. He looked like a preppy from Washington, D.C., which stands for the District of Corruption. You know what I mean? And this guy was actually, if I didn't know any better, Kim and I might have sold several $1 million of real estate and put money into his fund. I have this friend of mine, and I was talking to him, and he asked me what I was doing. Now, what I have been doing, and Tom, Garrett, and Kim know, I've been studying Rickard's book, The New Case for Gold and all this currency wars, and we read, as a group, we study constantly together. So this guy goes, "Tell me what to do. Are you saying buy gold?" And I said, "I never said that." I said, I was explaining to him how gold fit in with the IMF and what an SDR was and all this. He had no idea what I was talking about. But he said, "Okay, just tell me what to do. Just tell me what, I'll buy gold. I'll do anything." And that's the problem.
Yes.
You see?
Yep.
People are so effing desperate.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. And so they go to these seminars and somebody tells them what to do.
And they do it.
And so that's why when Tom, Garrett, and I were down in Santiago, and then we said, well, this is how you buy a Bentley with taxes or whatever we said. And this attorney jumps up, "You can't do that." And then there was this confusion, which was really good in the room. And then when Tom cleared it up, how you buy Bentleys and Santiago and pay less taxes, the Bentley dealer sold a lot of Bentleys and Lamborghinis, which was good, because at the Rich Dad Company, we want you to drive Bentleys and Lamborghinis. We don't want you driving Toyotas.
And we got no commission from this salesman.
Good
I just
point.
want to be clear.
Good point.
We
But
didn't
Kim
make
and I
any
do
money
No
drive-
from
conflict
that.
of interest.
No conflict of
Yeah,
interest.
but Kim does have a Lamborghini, and I've had a
and I
Bentley,
love
and
my
I now have
Lamborghini.
Ferraris, and I explained that to the group. So anyway, so people are so desperate, they'll go to these seminars and actually pay good money to have somebody tell them what to do. Is that correct, Garrett?
Absolutely, Robert. Tom and I have been around the country to these seminars, and you have people in the room that are clearly interested in lining their pockets by giving people bad information. They have no problem at all with telling people what not to do, which is actually inaccurate.
And there's a lot of like popular new things that,
Right.
oh, let me show you this new trick here, how you can pay less taxes. The problem with that, for a lot of them, they're employees. And if they do what they do, they're actually in violation. See, the tax laws are different for employees, small business owners, big business, and investors. So what's the latest popular tax
Well, the new
dodge
flavor of the
corporation?
year is these IRAs. People have money in their IRA account,
And
right?
IRA is their retirement
their
account.
individual retirement
In the
account.
U.S., it's an individual retirement account. And so people have saved money in their IRA account, but like Robert has been saying, you don't get very much of a return if you have it in a bank account. And so they're looking for a way to maximize their IRA monies. And these promoters are saying you can do a self-directed IRA where you get to choose where the money goes, into real estate, into wherever you want. What happens is they take the next step and say that you can set up an LLC and you can manage the money with your self-directed IRA. And in most cases, this is a prohibited transaction, and the IRS has the ability to say that you have taken money from your retirement account, you have a 10% penalty, and you have to pay all sorts of interest payments.
It's worse than that, because if you have this so-called prohibited transaction, then it's treated as though everything's been distributed to you. Okay, you taxed on everything. You have huge penalties, and it's just the worst result ever. And really, this is all because it goes to this, just the same thing with your mutual fund guy. It goes to, why are they telling them this? Well, they're telling them this because they want to sell them real estate in their IRA, and they can
It's a
sell
bad
them.
thing, too.
They can sell them more real estate if they sell it inside the IRA than if they pull the money out, like they should, pull the money out and buy it outside the IRA. I mean, the calculation's not even close. You're so much better investing in real estate outside of your IRA than inside the IRA, but the promoter makes less money.
Okay, so I'm
Well,
sitting
tell me
there.
what to do. Just tell me what to do.
So I'm sitting there in the audience, and this is news to me, and I'm like, oh, this sounds really good. Okay, how would I know? What do I do? How would I know not to do that?
Well, and this is why you have to have good advisors. I mean, this is why you have
So
people
I'm
that you
listening
can.
there, and I don't have an advisor right now. What do I do?
Okay, so let me just say this real quick. The reason we have Tom and Garrett as our personal advisors, they have Tom is the author of the book Tax-Free Wealth, and Garrett Sutton is the author of Start Your Own Corporation. Start there. So what is that popular flavor of the month or flavor of the year?
Well, it's investing your IRA monies into using a checkbook LLC that owns the IRA owns the checkbook LLC, and you manage your money. But promoters are putting people into transactions that don't stand up IRS scrutiny.
So what are they selling? Is it the IRA or
No, they're selling the real estate.
The real estate.
This is
That
the
goes
key.
into their
is
IRA.
they're saying, so look, let me give you a very simple example. Let's say you have $100,000 in your IRA, right? If you pulled that money out, you'd pay tax, so you'd probably have $50,000 left. So the more that they can get you, and they want you to spend $100,000 on real estate, not $50,000 on real estate, even though you could get a lot more because of the debt if you bought it outside. So what happens is they're saying, well, look, you can buy more real estate from us if you keep it in the IRA. But the problem with that is you keep it in the IRA, you cause all sorts of challenges. What Garrett's talking about, this checkbook IRA, what happens is the IRS hates them. Let's just put it that way. The IRS hates this checkbook IRA. Because they say, look,
So,
you're probably contributing services to your IRA. You can't do that. You can't manage your property. You can't do this, and therefore we're going to hate it.
So the
Garrett,
bottom,
what do you say on the legal side, on the attorney side?
On the attorney side, you need to have really good advice. You need to engage in critical thinking. You have to ask yourself, why does this promoter want me to rush in and put money into this promotion? You need to talk to your attorney or read the materials in Tom's book, my book, and understand how the IRS is coming after people. It's interesting. There have been 2 cases where the tax court has shut down these IRA promotions. And it's interesting. The court mentioned the name of the Colorado CPA that put these together. It was the same guy. And you've got to know that the IRS is looking into all of his clients' cases now, because the IRS is able to collect $100,000 to $200,000 in penalties per case on these. So the IRS has an incentive.
So the advice is, if you go and you hear about some deal or some scheme or something, don't jump in. Go get educated.
Go get educated.
Go study it. Go learn about it.
It's the same advice
pros
for
and
everything.
cons. Yeah, because I'm sure at the events they're saying, do it now, do it now, do it now. You
Of
get the
course.
special deal,
Absolutely.
right?
You get a special deal if you do it now. All that takeaway.
That's a red flag right there.
Oh, we just happen to have a few properties
special,
here.
right?
We have a few properties here in Memphis or in Phoenix that you can just buy today.
Blue light special.
Somebody's going to
Back
buy
in
them
the store.
tonight.
It's the same when we were in Honolulu. The same when we were in Honolulu.
I know.
Went to
Once
this-
again, it's Robert Kiyosaki at the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking about your most important asset, and that's your brain. And if you don't understand what's in your brain, past and future and present, then you're not going to change much. So the worst advice today is go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, invest for the long term in the stock market, get out of debt. That's the worst advice. But if you want to be middle class, it's not bad. Now, if you want to be rich, it's a whole nother level of advice. And the first thing you have to do is put some preparation H inside your brain and get rid of the old advice and then move forward and put new advice in. Otherwise, you're going to be like my friend of mine, just tell me what to do. And I said, have you read this book, this book, this book? No, I don't want to read. Just tell me what to do. I want you guys to be aware, because this is my hot button too, as well as Tom and Garrett and Kim. A lot of people will come up to me and say, well, you told me to do this. Robert, you said to do this. I said, first of all, I don't give advice. I tell you what I do. I use debt, I use this and this. I don't recommend you do it unless you want to pursue the educational path to get there. So be very, very careful. It makes me sick. I hear it all the time. Well, you said to do this. I said, where'd you get that from, And somebody says, well, you said that. You said to do that. And I'm going, what? What? Or you flip property, don't you? I said, no, I don't flip property. But I went to the seminar and they said, you flip property. Another guy says, I went to the seminar and they said, he is your personal advisor. I never heard of the guy.
Oh, we get that a lot.
Right.
Yep.
All the time.
We hear it too.
We hear it too. We go, well, so-and-so is a rich dad advisor. I'm going, I've never even heard of so-and-so.
Right.
I'm going,
Yeah.
I understand.
Our
But
Rich Dad
one of the
advisors
best
are
things
at
I've ever
richdad.com.
learned from you, Robert, is understanding the 3 sides of the coin, right? And being able to look at both sides of the coin, both the left and the right, be on the top of the coin, be in the middle, so that you can really start evaluating. And to me, that's the key to education, is looking at both sides.
So sports fans, we don't give investment advice. We do professional advice and educational advice and recommendations. But remember, it's your money and it's your brain and it's your future. If you're going to be like my friend who makes a lot of money, just tell me what to do. You told me to buy gold? I said, I didn't say that. But you're buying gold? I said, I am, but I don't recommend it for you. But you buying gold, right? Tell me what to do. And I go,
Give me the fish. Don't be teaching me how to
Right.
fish. Give me the
Right.
fish.
You're an idiot. Oh, I know what's even worse. Some people come up to me now, relatives, and they say, oh, I'm buying real estate. I said, at the top of the market? You should have been buying at the bottom of the market. Yeah, but my broker says the price will keep going up. I'm going, are you effing nuts? Who made money, you or your broker? Well, this price is going up, right? And real estate always goes up, right? And I'm going, this is what I'm talking about. You better put some X-lax in your brain and start fresh. Look at the world through clear eyes here. So that's really what this program is about. And I'll say it again and again. I do not recommend you buy any real estate any investment, stocks, bonds, real estate, gold or silver. Other things, I will tell you what I do. I'm not saying you should do that. What I recommend you do is you know that there's poor, middle class, and rich. And if you want to be rich, the Rich Dad Company is for you. You want to be poor and middle class, go to Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman. They have great advice for the poor and for the middle class. But the rich do things differently. And one of the things we do differently is we have professional advisors. We don't have promoters, like they're selling you real estate or we're selling you this. I don't think any of the people on our team sell any kind of asset, do we? I don't know of any.
nobody's up there selling assets. Nobody's up there selling investments. We're in it for the education. I mean, we drink the Kool-Aid. We love the education. I mean, we really do love the education.
And this is a very important program to listen to again, because what we're talking about today is your greatest asset is your brain. And many people are operating with old information in their brain. For example, when I came out of school, you could save your way to retirement. Today you can't. Saving money is the most stupid thing you can do, yet people still try and save money. And on the other side of this coin is that you have people like me who use debt instead of money. Now, am I saying to use debt? No. You have got to first invest in your education to do that. So there is a big gap. Why the poor middle class will get poor is because most of them do not want to study. They do not want to invest in their financial education. And that's their tough luck, but that is their choice. And that is most people. So our guests today are Tom Wheelwright, Rich Dad Advisor on Taxes, founder and CEO ProVision, premier strategic CPA firm, author of Tax-Free Wealth. Website is provisionwealth.com. And Garrett Sutton, author and Rich Dad Advisor. He's an attorney. And his book is Start Your Own Corporation, 2012, and the ABCs of Getting Out of Debt. His website is sutlaw.com. And, of course, my sweetheart, Kim. But as we said for this last thing here, your greatest asset is your brain, and yet people don't know what they're putting in their brain. Much of it is old stuff, and they're still trying to save money when the governments are printing money at all times. It doesn't make much sense. Any comments, Kim?
Well, I think one of the main points of this program is whatever advice you hear, you really got to think for yourself and question it. And one of the first questions I would ask is if somebody's saying, do this, I'm like, is this really an advisor or is this a salesperson?
So you can submit your questions to Ask Robert at richdadradio.com. We can't guarantee we'll answer all of them, but we answer the questions that fit the context of our radio show. First question, Melissa.
Our first question today comes from Christopher in Los Angeles. Favorite book, Cashflow Quadrant. He says, Robert, I've recently been studying Rich Dad Advisor Tom Wheelwright's book, Tax-Free Wealth.
Oh, very smart person.
Very smart
Very
guy.
smart guy.
Brilliant question. I know it's good already.
It's a great read, but I'm having trouble understanding one part about real estate and taxes. Tom says that one can only use passive losses, such as depreciation, to offset taxes on passive income. But you've mentioned that you and others have used real estate rental income to offset taxes on earned income. What is it I'm missing?
Well, obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about. Tom, what's the answer to that?
What's the answer, Tom? Come on.
No, but first of all, The Quadrant is a fantastic book to read, and this guy is doing it the right way. If you're going to change quadrants, you've got to study, because E, S, B, and the I, employee, self-employed, big business, investor, they're four completely different people. Most employees cannot leave the employee quadrant. They cannot leave it because one thing holds them in place, fear. They're so afraid of making mistakes, and they need that paycheck. Once you get into the S, it's really, really tough to go to the B, because, again, there's like four different types of persons. So what he's doing is reading, so he's getting this ability to move out of wherever he's at, either into the B, S, or I. Right, Tom?
No question. I actually just applaud him, because here's somebody who's studying. Okay, they're actually studying the book. They're asking good questions. I'm hearing one thing from you. This is what we were talking about earlier, right? They're not just asking, well, Robert, what's the answer? He's saying, I heard one thing over here, and then I read something over here. Now, how do I reconcile those two? So it's a great question. And the answer, of course, gets into the details. And the primary difference is if you're in the E quadrant, okay, if you're in the E quadrant,
employee.
You're not going to be able, you've got passive losses. They can only offset passive income. If you're in the I quadrant, you're a professional investor, the rules change. So it's like you say, Robert, the rules are different in the different quadrants.
Yeah, and I never said I offset earned income with passive income.
Well, what you did say, though, is you said, here, this is the subtle distinction. You said, I offset earned income with losses from my real estate. But for you, losses from your real estate are not passive losses. And that's the distinction, because the rules are different in the I quadrant than they are in the E and the S quadrant.
And the nice thing about the I quadrant is when I left the Marine Corps, my rich dad said to me, he says, you have E, S, B, and the I. Of course, my poor dad wanted me to go back get my MBA to be a high-paid employee, be a corporate guy. And Rich Dad says, ultimately, by the end of your life, you want to be in the I quadrant. The difference is the study and information and the being The being is very, very different in the I quadrant than the E quadrant, right? I mean,
it's completely different. We're talking about a professional investor doesn't have the same rules as an amateur investor, and that's really what it comes down to. And in this case, if you're an amateur investor, you've got passive losses. If you're a professional investor, the losses aren't passive anymore. And so that's the difference, and it's asking the right question. I just think that's great question.
The lesson is he's studying so that he knows how to move into either the I, B, or S quadrant.
And he'll know what questions to ask of his
Right.
advisors, which are really
Exactly.
important.
Yeah, that's a very important question. Congratulations on that. Okay.
Yay,
But
Christopher.
Again, that's one thing. People say you said this. I said, no, I don't say that. I asked Tom, and Tom tells him what to do. That's what I do. Melissa, next question.
Our next question comes from Michael in New York. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He says, what are your thoughts on using dividend participating whole life as an investment and also for cash flow?
That's a very middle class idea. That's what I have to say about it. I wouldn't use it personally because I don't have to use it. Any comments there, Garrett?
You know, I don't use those type of strategies either.
Middle class. Very
What
safe,
is
safe,
it? What is
safe.
he talking about? Whole life? What are you talking about?
It depends on how sophisticated you get with it, okay? I think that you can take any investment and you can invest like a poor person, you can invest like a middle-class person, you can invest like a rich person. So even in a whole life policy, there are some opportunities there to leverage your investment. So again, what I would tell them is get educated, make sure you understand what it is, and make sure that it fits your strategy. Because if it does, it's great. If it doesn't matter how good it is, it doesn't work.
But there's one big problem with insurance right now. They're not getting the returns they're getting. So a lot of them cannot give the dividends they used to give 20 years ago. So a whole life might have been a great idea 20 years ago, but today I would look at the insurance company before I bought the whole idea of it. It's very middle class. It's tell me what to do, give me your money.
And one of the challenges with what they're talking about here is that they're probably talking about a universal life policy, which is tied to the stock market. So now you're getting back to the stock market. You're getting back to, is the stock market going to continue to go up? And you have to look at all sides of the coin.
And this is an area where promoters generate huge commissions.
Right.
So you have to ask yourself, what is this advisor getting out of the deal?
And they get a lot of commission. So they get rich, but you don't. Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Stephen in Las Vegas. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Are annuities a good investment? That's his question.
Again, it's very middle class.
Okay, so what's an annuity? Let's explain annuity.
Tom, what's an annuity? I know what it is. I know you give these guys a whole chunk of money. They
And they
invest
give you
it
a
for you,
tiny
and they
bit
give you a
back.
little bit of it.
Right. You know, the reality is, I mean, like you say, if an annuity comes from a life insurance company, so there's very little risk. Okay, life insurance
Yes,
company.
very little
but you
return.
stand
But
up.
there's
and
very little return.
You pick up the soap because you don't make much money from it.
Oh no! I mean, annuities pay like a
Huge commissions.
small percentage.
Well, and the commissions
And
are huge on annuity
The
deals.
reason that people push annuities, the highest commission of any financial product, is an annuity.
So wouldn't annuity, if they're paying the high fees and you're getting a tiny little bit of return, aren't you actually losing money?
Well, you are, just compared to what you could have gotten. But again, it's like Robert says, it's a middle class investment because it's safe. Okay,
That's like my golf teacher years ago when I walked up to take a lesson. He says, "Oh, here comes my walking annuity." He says, "I'm going to take your money, but you're never going to get any better because you're really a terrible golfer."
Yeah, it's kind of like mutual funds. Annuities are great if you're selling them.
Yes. Yes.
Any comments there, Garrett, from an asset protection side?
Asset protection, you can protect annuities with asset protection in some states. So a creditor can not get certain annuity payments.
Yeah. Again, if you don't want to get educated and you just want to give somebody your money, it's better than keeping it in the bank, but that might be questionable in the future. That's all I'm saying, because insurance companies are having a hard time covering their gains. I mean, Buffett's doing okay, but he trades stock. And there's a very big difference between investing in stock and trading stock. So there's a lot to learn. The lesson here is this: you don't want to learn annuities okay. Next question, Melissa.
We have another question here this one's going to be for Garrett. This is from Grayson in Omaha, Nebraska. Favorite book, Midas Touch. I've just started a home-based business. My wife says I need to set up an LLC. I don't think so. Why do I need protection if I'm just starting out?
Is your wife an attorney?
There's a good
give me a break here.
question. Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah.
It is a good question, and I always think that when you start out, you should have that LLC right off the bat. You don't know what can happen. And frequently what happens is people make that decision, I'm not going to set up the LLC at the start, and then they forget to set up the LLC 2 years later, and they get in trouble.
So what's the
and
difference
then they're not
between
protected.
if they're just having in their own name versus an LLC? What's the difference?
The difference is if it's in your own name, it's a sole proprietorship, and you are personally responsible for everything that could go wrong within that business. Now,
So you're
they can
putting your
reach
house, you're putting everything
all
at
your
risk.
assets are exposed.
Okay.
By having that LLC, if you get sued in your business, they can reach what's inside the LLC, the limited liability company.
What is an LLC versus a C corporation, all that stuff? That's why you have an attorney, okay?
Right.
If we have to explain this on this show, we'll be out of time. You should go to law school then, right?
Well, or read Start Your Own Corporation because it's clearly identified there. So they're entities. They all offer limited liability protection, which is what you want when you start a business. We live in a very litigious society. People sue over the smallest of grievances. And so right at the start, I would talk to your wife and say, look, we need an LLC at the start to protect
And
ourselves.
why wouldn't you? I mean, what does it cost to set up an LLC? I mean,
You mentioned Rich Dad, $595.
yeah, why wouldn't you?
So my favorite thing I've learned from Garrett is you don't put on the seatbelt after you've had the accident. It doesn't do you any good.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Or you can't buy fire insurance after your house burned down.
Exactly.
You see, when I invest in real estate, it's very low risk because I have insurance, I have LLCs, I have all of this stuff. You have a 401k. Do you have any fire protection?
None.
None. You have any asset protection? Not much.
Some. You have
a
some,
little,
but
a
What
little.
I mean is,
A little.
don't you get taxed at the highest rate?
You have no tax protection. It's a horrible idea from a tax standpoint.
Right. So the 401k was designed to make Wall Street richer, not you. Yet everybody goes, well, I have a 401k. And what's happening right now, the baby boom generation was the first generation with a 401k because the 401k came out in 1978. And that's why so many baby boomers are wondering, why do I feel so insecure? Because you have a 401k.
That's right.
You have a 401k. That's the problem, sweetheart. And you got sold a bill of goods. And that was a whole part of this program here, is that your greatest asset is your brain. You got to be careful who puts doo-doo in it. You know, be very careful. I hear so many people say, I don't have to I have a 401k. I'm going, God, now I'm worried. You know what I mean? Because why, tax-wise, is it no good?
Well, because when you take the money out, even if it's invested in stocks, which would ordinarily be taxed at a low rate, 15, 20%, sometimes even zero, because it's in a 401k, when you do get taxed, it's going to be taxed at the highest rate. So you've actually doubled your rate potentially just by putting it to in a 401k. So it makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.